The scent of roasted turkey and pine needles usually filled Amelia with a comforting warmth, a feeling of belonging that Christmas was supposed to represent. But this year, sitting at her sister-in-law Megan's meticulously set dining table, the air felt thick with a different kind of spice, unspoken resentment. Every clink of silverware against porcelain seemed to echo in the cavernous dining room, a space Megan had decorated with such aggressive festivity it felt less like a home and more like a department store display. Thomas, her husband, sat beside her, blissfully unaware, or perhaps willfully ignorant, of the subtle chill directed at his wife. He laughed at a dry joke his father told, his hand resting lightly on Amelia's knee. It was a gesture meant to be reassuring, to include her in the fold of his family, but it only made her feel more like an island. For 5 years, she had been an island in the archipelago of his family, a chain of people bound by decades of shared history and inside jokes she could never quite decipher. Megan, holding court at the opposite end of the table, was the gatekeeper of that history. Her smile never quite reached her eyes when she looked at Amelia. It was a polite, brittle thing, a mask for a disapproval Amelia had felt from the day Thomas introduced them. She had tried, genuinely, to connect with her sister-in-law. She brought thoughtful gifts, offered to help with dinner preparations, an offer that was always politely but firmly declined, and she listened intently to stories about a childhood she wasn't a part of. Nothing worked. Tonight, the tension was sharper. Perhaps it was the news of the Penthouse. A few months prior, Amelia's tech company had gone public, a success that had afforded her and Thomas a level of comfort they had only dreamed of. They had bought a stunning penthouse apartment overlooking the city, a place of glass walls and open skies. Amelia loved it. It was a symbol of her hard work, a quiet sanctuary from the world. To Megan, however, it seemed to be a symbol of something else. "I must say, Amelia," Megan began, her voice slicing through the low hum of conversation, "it must be so different for you, spending Christmas here in our humble home." She gestured vaguely with a wineglass, the diamonds on her fingers catching the light. "I imagine our little suburban life feels rather quaint after your palace in the sky." A few heads turned. Thomas's hand tensed on Amelia's knee. "Megan," he said, his tone a gentle warning. Amelia forced a smile. "Not at all, Megan. Your home is lovely. It's so festive." "Is it?" Megan replied, her eyebrows arched in mock surprise. "I do my best. Of course, I don't have a team of decorators like some people, just my own 2 hands." The jab was clear, and it landed. Amelia had hired a designer to help with the penthouse, a fact she had mentioned in passing, never as a boast. Now it was being wielded like a weapon. She felt a familiar heat rise in her cheeks. She wanted to defend herself, to say that her success wasn't a slight against their way of life, but she knew it would be futile. In Megan's narrative, Amelia was the outsider, the one who didn't fit, the one who thought she was better than them. The rest of the dinner passed in a similar vein. Every comment Megan made was a veiled comparison, a subtle dig at Amelia's career, her choices, her very presence. She talked about the importance of a mother being home with her children, glancing at Amelia, who had no children. She lamented how money was changing the world, making people forget what was truly important, her gaze once again finding Amelia's. Amelia retreated into herself, pushing food around her plate, the delicious meal turning to ash in her mouth. She felt Thomas's worried glances but didn't know how to respond to them. What could he do? This was his sister. This was his family. The final straw came when dessert was served. As Megan placed a slice of pumpkin pie in front of her, she leaned in close, her voice a low, venomous whisper meant only for Amelia. "You know, I don't understand why you even bother coming," she hissed, the festive mask finally dropping to reveal the pure contempt beneath. "You don't belong here. You look down on us with your fancy job and your glass tower. It's Christmas. It's for family. So why don't you do us all a favor and leave?" The words struck Amelia with the force of a physical blow. For a moment, all the air left her lungs. "Leave!" It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command, delivered with such precision and cruelty that it felt like a shard of ice lodging in her heart. She looked at Megan's face, twisted in a smug, triumphant smile, and something inside Amelia, something that had been chipping away for 5 long years, finally broke. But it didn't break into pieces of despair. It shattered into a million points of sharp, sudden clarity. Megan was right about one thing. She didn't belong here. She had spent years trying to shrink herself to fit into a space that was never meant for her, contorting her personality and dimming her own light to appease a family that saw her success not as something to be proud of, but as a judgment on their own lives. She had been so focused on winning their approval that she had forgotten how to approve of herself. Slowly, Amelia placed her fork down on the dessert plate, the small clink sounding like a gavel in the sudden silence of her mind. She looked past Megan to Thomas's parents, to his aunts and uncles, all caught up in their own conversations, oblivious to the quiet execution that had just taken place. And then she looked at Thomas, who was now looking at her, a frown of concern creasing his forehead. He had seen her face, if not heard the words. He saw the shift. With a calmness that surprised even herself, Amelia dabbed her lips with her napkin, folded it deliberately, and placed it on the table. She pushed her chair back, the legs scraping softly against the polished hardwood floor. Every eye at the table turned to her. "If you'll excuse me," she said, her voice even and clear, carrying none of the tremor she felt inside. She didn't look at Megan. She didn't need to. Her audience was everyone else. "I think it's time for me to go." A ripple of confusion went around the table. Thomas's mother, a woman who usually remained in the background, spoke up. "Amelia, dear, is everything all right? You've barely touched your pie." Amelia offered her a small, genuine smile. It was perhaps the first honest expression she had worn all evening. "Everything is perfectly fine, thank you, Carol. I just realized I have other plans." Thomas was on his feet now, his hand on her arm. "Amelia, what's going on?" he whispered, his eyes darting from her to his sister, finally sensing the source of the rupture. Amelia turned to face her husband, her expression softening. She loved him, and this was not his fault. Not entirely. But he was part of this world that was suffocating her. "I'm going home, Thomas," she said softly, but with unshakable finality. "Megan has made it quite clear that I'm not welcome here." The name hung in the air. Megan's face flushed a blotchy red. "I never said that. She's twisting my words." But the denial was weak, and the guilt in her eyes was a confession. Thomas looked at his sister, and for the first time Amelia saw a flicker of profound disappointment in his expression. He had seen the whispers, the subtle barbs for years, but had perhaps chosen to believe they were minor disagreements, sisterly squabbles. Now, confronted with the raw result, he couldn't ignore it. "I'll come with you," he said, his jaw tight. Amelia put a gentle hand on his chest. "No," she said. "Not yet. This is your family. It's Christmas. You should stay. I'll be fine. I promise." She saw the conflict in his eyes, the pull between his family and his wife. She didn't want him to have to choose, not like this, not in a moment of anger. This was her decision, her departure. "We can talk later," she added, a promise in her tone. She didn't wait for an argument. She walked to the entryway, her posture erect, feeling a strange sense of lightness with every step. She retrieved her coat from the closet, a stylish cashmere piece that now felt like armor. As she slipped it on, she could hear the frantic, hushed whispers breaking out in the dining room. She ignored them. As her hand closed around the cold metal of the doorknob, she paused. The idea, brilliant and audacious, bloomed in her mind. It wasn't born of revenge, not really. It was born of a sudden, fierce need to reclaim the night, to fill it with the joy and warmth that had been stolen from her. She turned back, not to the dining room, but to her brother-in-law, Mark, Megan's husband, who had always been kind to her in his quiet way. She also caught the eye of Thomas's younger cousin, Sarah, who had always looked at Amelia with a sort of wide-eyed admiration. "Mark, Sarah," she said, her voice carrying a new, vibrant energy. "For anyone who's not quite ready for the night to end, I'm hosting an after-party, at my place, starting in an hour." She smiled, a real, dazzling smile this time. Then, she opened the door, stepped out into the cold, crisp night, and walked away from her husband's family, finally heading home. The drive from Megan's suffocating suburban neighborhood to the heart of the city was a journey through worlds. Amelia drove, her window cracked just enough to let in the frigid night air, the sharp cold, a welcome contrast to the hot anger and humiliation that had been simmering in her for hours. Christmas lights blurred into streaks of red, green, and gold, painting the darkness outside her car. On the radio, a gentle carol played, and for the first time that evening, the music didn't feel like a mandate for forced cheer. It felt like a soundtrack to her liberation. With each mile she put between herself and that dining room, the weight on her shoulders lessened. Megan's venomous whisper, "Leave," echoed in her mind, but its power was fading. It was no longer a rejection, it was a release. Megan had, in her own cruel way, given Amelia the greatest gift she could have received this Christmas. permission to stop trying. Pulling into the private garage beneath her building, she was greeted by the night doorman, a kind man named George. "Merry Christmas, Ms. Hale," he said with a warm smile. "Back a little early?" "Merry Christmas, George," she replied, her own smile genuine and unforced. "Decided to move the party here." His eyebrows raised in polite curiosity, but he simply nodded. "Very good, ma'am. Let me know if you or your guests need anything at all." The elevator ride up was a silent ascent into her sanctuary. When the doors opened directly into her foyer, she stepped in and took a deep, cleansing breath. The air here was different. It smelled of her, of the subtle scent of eucalyptus and amber from the candles she favored. There were no cloying pine or potpourri scents trying to manufacture a feeling. There was just peace. She kicked off her heels, the soft, cool marble of the floor a relief to her tired feet. She walked through the sprawling living area, a space defined by clean lines, comfortable but elegant furniture, and art she had chosen with care. And then there was the view. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls, the city was spread out before her, a breathtaking tapestry of glittering lights under a clear, star-dusted sky. This was her home. This was her reward. This was the glass tower Megan had tried to use as an insult. But looking at it now, Amelia felt nothing but pride. For a fleeting moment, a pang of loneliness hit her. The apartment felt vast and empty. Her phone was silent. No word from Thomas. Had she been rash? Had she just blown up her marriage and her entire family life over one cruel comment? The doubt crept in, a cold tendril of fear. Then her eyes landed on the bar, a beautiful custom-built piece stocked with the finest spirits, wines, and champagnes. An idea, a continuation of the one that had sparked as she was leaving, solidified in her mind. This was not a night for loneliness. This was a night for celebration. Her celebration. A new energy coursed through her. She was no longer the victim fleeing the scene. She was the host preparing for a party. She slipped out of her formal dress and into a pair of tailored silk trousers and a comfortable cashmere sweater, still elegant, but hers. She put on a playlist, filling the silent apartment with the smooth, soulful sounds of a classic jazz trio. Then she went to work. With the practiced efficiency of a woman who knew how to manage multi-million-dollar projects, she orchestrated her impromptu party. A few taps on a high-end delivery app and a curated selection of gourmet appetizers, prosciutto-wrapped dates, miniature crab cakes, a lavish cheese and charcuterie board, was on its way from a renowned 24-hour bistro across town. She pulled out flutes and wine glasses, arranging them on the marble island in her kitchen. She found a bottle of her favorite champagne, the good stuff she saved for special occasions, and put it on ice. This, she decided, was a very special occasion. It was the night she took her own side. As she lit a few more candles, the space transformed. It was no longer an empty apartment. It was an intimate, glowing haven, warm and inviting. She had created an atmosphere not of forced festivity, but of genuine welcome. This was a place you would want to be. Just as she finished, her phone buzzed. It was a text from her brother-in-law, Mark. "On our way. Sarah is with us. You weren't kidding, were you?" Amelia smiled and typed back a quick reply. "Never. The champagne is chilling." She poured herself a glass, the tiny bubbles fizzing with a life that matched her own renewed spirit. She walked to the window, looking down at the river of headlights flowing through the city streets below. She had no idea how the rest of the night would unfold, what the consequences would be, or when Thomas would finally call. But for the first time in a very long time, she felt completely, unapologetically herself. And then, right on cue, the private chime of the elevator echoed through the foyer. Her first guests had arrived. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing Mark and Sarah standing somewhat awkwardly in the small mirrored space. Mark, Megan's husband, had his hands shoved in his pockets, his expression a mixture of apology and apprehension. Sarah, Thomas's young cousin, clutched a small purse, her eyes wide as she took in the marble foyer and the glimpse of the spectacular view beyond. Amelia's warm smile immediately put them at ease. "I'm so glad you came," she said, her voice full of genuine sincerity. She stepped forward and gave Mark a brief, friendly hug. "You're a brave man." Mark let out a short, wry laugh. "You have no idea. The temperature in that house dropped about 30 degrees after you left. I think hell might actually be freezing over as we speak." He looked at her, his eyes serious. "Amelia, for what it's worth, I am so incredibly sorry. What Megan said, it was inexcusable. You don't have to apologize for her, Mark," Amelia said gently. "But thank you. And thank you for coming." Her gaze shifted to Sarah, who was staring, mesmerized at the city lights. Sarah, welcome. Come in. Get warm. Amelia, this place is... Sarah breathed, stepping into the living room. It's like a movie. It's beautiful. She looked back towards the foyer, a small, mischievous grin on her face. Megan was not exaggerating. It really is a palace. Amelia laughed, a full, hearty sound that felt wonderful. Well, I'm the queen tonight, and I decree that the first order of business is champagne. She led them to the kitchen island, where she expertly uncorked the bottle of champagne, the pop echoing the festive mood she was determined to create. She filled 3 tall flutes and handed them out. Mark raised his glass. To impromptu parties, he said. And to new traditions, Sarah added, her eyes sparkling. To new traditions, Amelia echoed, clinking her glass against theirs. The crystal rang with a clear, hopeful note. They stood there for a moment, sipping the crisp, cold champagne, the smooth jazz a perfect backdrop to the quiet hum of the city outside. The awkwardness melted away, replaced by a comfortable camaraderie. So, Amelia asked, leaning against the counter, how bad was it? The fallout? Mark winced. Nuclear. Megan tried to play the victim, of course. Said you were oversensitive, that she was just joking. Thomas's mom tried to smooth things over, and his dad just looked like he wanted to disappear. But Thomas, he wasn't having it. He and Megan had a pretty serious argument. I've never seen him that angry at her. A part of Amelia was relieved to hear it, but she also felt a twinge of sadness for Thomas, caught in the middle. He wanted to leave right away, Mark continued, but your text came through saying you were okay and needed some space. It was probably for the best, letting things cool down. Before Amelia could process that, the elevator chimed again. All 3 of them turned, surprised. Amelia hadn't invited anyone else. The doors opened to reveal Patricia, Thomas's aunt, a quiet woman in her late 60s who rarely spoke up at family gatherings. She held a half-eaten plate of pie, still in Megan's festive porcelain. I hope you don't mind, Patricia said, a twinkle in her eye. Mark texted me the address from the car. I decided this pumpkin pie was too good to be abandoned in a war zone. Amelia burst out laughing, a joyous, uninhibited sound. She rushed to hug the older woman. Patricia, you are my hero. Please, come in. Can I get you something stronger than pie? A small glass of that champagne wouldn't go amiss, Patricia said, setting the plate down. My nerves are shot, honestly, that girl. I love my niece, but she has a mean streak that could curdle milk. What she said to you was appalling. I've been wanting to walk out of her Christmas dinner for years. The arrival of the food delivery was perfectly timed, and soon the island was laden with beautiful, delicious appetizers. What had started as a solitary act of defiance had turned into a genuine party. The 4 of them gathered, talking, laughing, and sharing stories. Sarah asked Amelia about her company, her questions intelligent and full of admiration. Mark talked about his passion for woodworking, a hobby Megan often dismissed. Patricia shared wicked-sharp observations about the family that had Amelia and Sarah in stitches. This was a different kind of family, a chosen one. A small group of people who had for one night opted out of obligation and drama and chosen kindness and connection instead. In the middle of a story from Patricia, Amelia's phone buzzed on the counter. The name Thomas lit up the screen. Her heart gave a little jump. She picked it up and walked towards the quieter space by the floor-to-ceiling windows. Hello? She answered. Amelia? Are you okay? His voice was tight with stress. Where are you? I was about to leave. I'm home, Thomas, she said, her own voice calm and steady. She looked out at the glittering city, then back at the warm, happy scene in her living room. Mark and Patricia were laughing at something Sarah said. And I'm perfectly okay. I'm more than okay, actually. What's that noise? It sounds like you have people over. I do, she said simply. Mark and Sarah and your Aunt Patricia are here. We're just having a drink. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. She could almost picture his face, the confusion and disbelief. He had likely imagined her crying, alone, waiting for him. He hadn't imagined this. My Aunt Patricia? Is there? He stammered. She is. She even brought pie, Amelia said, a smile in her voice. Listen, Thomas, I'm not angry, and I don't want to fight. But I also don't want to rehash this tonight. Enjoy the rest of your Christmas with your parents. We have all day tomorrow to talk. Really talk, okay? But tomorrow, Thomas? She repeated, gently but firmly. Good night. I love you. She ended the call before he could protest further, taking back control not just of the conversation, but of her own emotional state. She rejoined her guests, a feeling of profound peace settling over her. The night was hers. The home was hers. And for the first time, the joy was hers too. The small impromptu party continued for another hour, a bubble of warmth and genuine laughter suspended high above the silent city. They didn't talk much more about Megan or the disastrous dinner. Instead, they talked about life, about dreams, about the simple, funny absurdities of being human. Amelia learned that Patricia had a secret ambition to visit Japan to see the cherry blossoms, and she found herself offering to help plan the trip. She saw confidence in Sarah bloom as the young woman talked about her desire to switch her major to architecture, inspired by the very building she was in. It was Patricia who first made a move to leave. "Well," she announced, standing up and smoothing her dress, "this old woman needs her beauty sleep. This has been the most eventful Christmas I've had in a decade." She turned to Amelia, her expression soft and sincere. "Thank you, my dear, for showing us that there's always another option than just sitting and taking it. You have a good head on your shoulders and a good heart. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." Mark and Sarah stood to leave as well. "I should probably go face the music," Mark said with a grimace, though it was softened by a smile. "But tonight was worth it. Really. If you need anything, Amelia, call." "Thank you all for coming," Amelia said, feeling a swell of emotion that had nothing to do with sadness. "You turned my night around." After she saw them to the elevator, a comfortable silence settled over the apartment once more. But this time it wasn't empty. It was filled with the lingering energy of her friends, with the echoes of their laughter. She gathered the used glasses, the remnants of a party she hadn't planned, and felt a profound sense of peace. She had not only survived the evening, she had conquered it. She had taken a moment designed to make her feel small and powerless, and had transformed it into a declaration of her own worth. She was standing by the window, looking at the distant, unblinking lights of an airplane crossing the sky, when she heard the elevator chime one last time. She didn't have to turn to know who it was. The soft thud of the doors opening was followed by tentative footsteps in the foyer. Thomas appeared at the edge of the living room, his coat still on, his face etched with exhaustion and a deep, uncertain sadness. He looked around at the glasses, the leftover food, the warm, inviting atmosphere, and his shoulders seemed to slump. "It looks like you did just fine without me," he said, his voice quiet. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. "I did," Amelia replied, her voice equally quiet, but firm. "I had to." He walked towards her slowly, stopping a few feet away. "I am so sorry, Amelia. For tonight. For all of it. For years I've seen it, the little things, and I told myself it wasn't that bad, that it was just Megan being Megan. I didn't want to see how much it was hurting you. And by not stopping it, I was letting it happen. I was complicit. My silence was a choice. This was different. This wasn't the usual, I'll talk to her promise. This was an admission of his own role in her pain. This was the accountability she had stopped hoping for. When you left tonight," he continued, his voice thick with emotion, "and I saw Megan's face, I didn't see a sister I needed to protect. I saw a bully. And when Aunt Patricia got up and walked out with her pie, I realized you weren't the only one who was suffocating. You were just the only one brave enough to open a window." He finally closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. They were cold. "I told them that our home is our priority now. My priority. That the days of begging for a seat at a table where my wife is disrespected are over. If they want to be a part of our lives, the door to our home is open, but the price of admission is respect. For you." Amelia looked into his eyes, searching for the slightest hint of doubt, and found none. She saw the man she had fallen in love with, the man who had gotten lost somewhere between his obligations and her comfort. She squeezed his hands. "I hosted an after-party, Thomas." A small, weary smile touched his lips. "I heard. Aunt Patricia already texted me. She called it the Christmas Rebellion and said her pie tasted like freedom." Amelia let out a soft laugh, and the last of the tension in her chest dissolved. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly. They stood there together in silence, looking out at their city, at the endless expanse of light stretching to the horizon. It wasn't the Christmas they had planned, filled with the loud, chaotic traditions of his family. It was something quieter, something new. It was the beginning of their own tradition, forged not in obligation, but in a deliberate choice. It was the night they came home,